With this, we are moving on to the next session, which deals with maritime dimensions in the Indo-Pacific and Indian Ocean region. For this, I would like to call upon Commodore R.S. Vasan, Indian Navy Retired Director C3S and Regional Director National Maritime Foundation to chair the session. Over to Vasan, sir.
And first of all, I would like to thank General Narasimhan and all the three panelists of the previous session for a wonderful session. I think there are a lot of rare insights, and particularly coming from General Narasimhan, who is in the know-how of what is happening in the powers of corridor. It's been extremely useful in trying to understand what the challenges are and in what position are we here in terms of being able to respond to China. Anyway, we'll move on to the next session. And I did allow a certain amount of extension of this with the permission of the chair for the previous session, because you will never get these kind of experts in one panel on any other day. So even if we extended it, it was well worth the effort to allow the chair to go on till 1200. So now it's my proud privilege to chair this session, which has three very eminent people who are going to be discussing the challenges that lie ahead in the Indo-Pacific. We have Commodore Udai Rao, who is a practicing naval officer and a scholar. We've been colleagues in the Navy for a long time. He was DNI earlier, and he is also in the thick of action in IPKF when we launched the action here in our southern neighbor state. Then he's also been with the government along with Mr. Pratap Heblika. So he has a rich experience in what he's going to deal with today. The other speaker is Professor Subramanya Raju, who I have known him for decades now, and who's doing a wonderful job in Pondicherry University by having commissioned the Maritime Studies Center. And he's been doing rendering human service to the study of maritime issues. Just last week, we had another excellent session at the Pondicherry University, again trying to unravel the challenges in the Indo-Pacific. And the third speaker is our own homegrown scholar, Bala, who's been writing extensively on issues of Indo-Pacific, and all these articles have been received well. He's been writing for Diplomat, he's writing for other South Asia Analysis Group, and he is, of course, the mainstay of Chennai Centre for China Studies in terms of coordinating our efforts and trying to bring together various experts onto this issue. I will not say much about the topic. I'll wait for the three speakers to finish their presentations before putting together my own views on not only the presentations that are going to be made ahead of us, also my own personal views on how we are going to look at the emerging challenges in the Indo-Pacific area. And without much ado, let me turn you over to Commodore Udai Rao, who's the first speaker, who is going to look at the dimensions of Chinese surge into the Indian Ocean region. Over to you, Udai.
Thank you, sir. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My topic, as you can see, is on the screen, China's surge into the Indian Ocean region. This presentation is basically for the younger lot who seem to have taken a back seat, the scholars and researchers, etc. Right. So I will deal with my talk as indicated, China's interest in the Indian Ocean region, the dragon heads west, India's maritime neighborhood, augmenting the Andaman and Nicobar Command, and conclusion. Now my focus is basically Indian Ocean region, basically due to time constraints, and especially since IOR is a primary area of interest, with South China Sea as a secondary area. Now, in the maritime domain, we've always been focused in the Indian Ocean region. In fact, as late as 2013, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said that we are well poised to be a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. Therefore, things like SAGAR, security and growth for all in the region, neighborhood first policy, look east to act east, Indo-Pacific policy, and the quadrilateral security dialogue, the new avatar, are all have manifested itself during the time of the new government of BJP. Now, in the term, Indo-Pacific has gained traction in recent years. Two water bodies which are connected together are in fact one single entity. There's also the quadrilateral security dialogue, since China is the primary challenge to Indo-Pacific security. Therefore, we have India, Japan, Australia, and the US coming together in 2017 once again. So therefore, the Act East policy, the Indo-Pacific policy, and the quadrilateral security dialogue all have the maritime medium as its backbone. Now, the South China Sea is the fountainhead of the surge. I think China has shaped the maritime domain well and is confident of South China Sea, and therefore has surged into the Indian Ocean region in recent years. Now, she imports 80% of her crude from West Asia and West Africa, which transits to the Indian Ocean region and exists through the Malacca Strait. Therefore, she has a long logistic tail, and we are well positioned, India, to be able to snip that SLOC. Now, Sunda and Lombok states are there, but they have the limitations. So hence China's Malacca dilemma and surge into the Indian Ocean region to protect her interests. For those of you who do not know, Malacca is there, and so also Sunda and Lombok Straits, as well as Ombai Vetar. I will not go into details of this. Now, China has hitherto been a land neighbor, but now is virtually an Indian Ocean country and a maritime neighbor too. So you have China in the north and China in the south. Now, when did it start? Actually, it started quite some time back, a couple of decades ago. The so-called string of pearls strategy. I will cover this a little later. Then the Belt and Road Initiative, and enough has been said about this morning by Mr. Retd and others. So I will not go into the Belt and Road Initiative. The dotted lines in blue is the road part of it, which is the maritime the side of it. Now, what most people do not know is that the Chinese Navy has not really forayed very much outside South China Sea or their area. And they used the anti-piracy mission of Somalia in 2008 as an experiment. The first task force was sent in 2008. Today, you have the 36th task force station, 2 destroyers of frigates and a supply ship. Now, this has been a fantastic training ground for China to practice long-range deployment, and she's also engaged in maritime diplomacy, etc., maritime cooperation, again, shaping the maritime domain. Now, this is a snapshot, 2 ships in the front, destroyers of frigates, and the supply ship in the rear. Now, the surge of submarines, conventional nuclear submarines in the Indian Ocean region started in 2014. They first visited Colombo and Karachi. And when a nuclear submarine surfaces somewhere, it makes a message. And there was a message for India too. And their explanation that the submarines that were used for anti-piracy mission is all hogwash, doesn't cut ice with anybody. Least of all a naval officer. And I feel the next stop will be Chittagong. Today, as per the Navy, there are at least 8 to 12 Chinese ships and submarines in the Indian Ocean at any one time. There could be more, but this is the broad number. Coming to string of pearls. Now, you know, the maritime neighbors, we have 7. We have delineated our maritime boundary line, IMBL, with all except Pakistan. Others we have. Now, the MA has an Indian Ocean region. The Sri Lanka and Maldives, of course, we share an IMBL. But very appropriately, Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar, Comoros, the Reunion are all neighbors too, due to the maritime connectivity the seas afford. Now, these are the countries for those, just to give you a better idea: Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles, Madagascar, Mauritius, and Reunion. Now, while we were fixated on Pakistan, China has crept in. And therefore, Prime Minister Modi's visit in 2015 to Seychelles, Mauritius, and Sri Lanka. That is where he enunciated SAGAR, or Security and Growth for All in the region. And he also initiated the Coastal Surveillance Radar Network. There was also talk of some strategic infrastructure on Assumption Island, Seychelles, and Agalega and Mauritius. These, I am told, have run into some political hot weather, heavy weather in their respective countries. And there may be a slight lag in implementation. Coming to Sri Lanka, of course, this is well known. Hambantota, China has got 80% stake for 99 years lease. And what a strategic position, just north of the international sea lanes. Now, she's also busy building the Colombo Port City project. The foreground is the reclamation taking place. China is very good at reclaiming islands and territory. In the north, you have the International Container Terminal. Now, India, Japan, and Sri Lanka, had agreed to do a tripartite development of Colombo East Container Terminal. But recently, Sri Lankan port workers have protested against privatization and giving it to India. This is definitely at the instigation of China. Now, what the point to remember is 70% of India's container traffic is transshipped to Colombo in terminals operated by Chinese companies. So there is an inherent risk which we need to factor. Sri Lanka, the new dispensation, of course, has talked about India first approach, etc. And we have also given a line of credit of $450 million for various projects. Coming to Maldives, now China has several projects in Maldives, and I understand that she leased an island called Fidu Fenolo for 50 years. China doesn't do anything for a short while. Now, China is there in the northernmost atoll, which is just south of the international sea lanes, in the Ihawan de Fulu atoll. Similarly, China is in the Malay atoll, where she's built the Friendship Bridge. Then she's also in Lamu Atollu. So therefore, China has got a finger everywhere, north to south, in the Maldives. The new president, of course, appears to be pro-India, but is constrained by the huge debts with China. India has given a $500 million grant to Maldives, and is probably going to construct a 6.7-kilometer bridge between Malé and 3 other islands. Now, just the other day, I think about a week ago, we have commissioned the Indo-Maldives cargo ferry, which I think is a damn good step. It will carry cargo, it will carry containers, it will carry people, it will carry water. So this is a good development, maritime connectivity with Maldives. Coming to Myanmar, now this is the China-Myanmar economic corridor between Chok Fu and Kunming in the Yunnan province. So basically, it can be used to push petroleum products into the hinterland, saving cost and time, avoid the long logistic tail, and overcome the Malacca dilemma. It's also an outlet into the Bay of Bengal. So it makes China a Bay of Bengal country now. And in the long term, Chok Fu, these are all dual-use ports eventually. It could affect the Andaman Nicobar Command. Now, what are we doing? We are developing Sitwe port. And we have the Kaladan multimodal project, which seems to go on forever. So this, of course, is multimodal in the sense that merchant ship will transit between Colombo and Sitwe, Kolkata and Sitwe, and then it will go by river and road to Aizawl. Therefore, if there's any pressure at Chicken Snake, which connects the mainland to northeast, we have an alternative route from the sea. Coming to Bangladesh, China has given 2 Ming-class submarines to Bangladesh, and she's building a submarine base at the Kutubudia. There's also the Chittagong port project. Now, we have signed coastal shipping and inland water transit arrangements with Bangladesh, especially when Prime Minister went there. So now marine traffic, including containers, will go from Kolkata to Mongla and Chittagong, which is Tatogram. And from there, it will go by multimodal transport to Tripura, Assam, and Meghalaya. This, again, is a good development because should there be any pressure on Chicken Snake or something untoward happens, hopefully it will not, then we have an alternative in a connection to our northeast. There are other problems, Rohingyas, CAA, sharing of Teesta River waters. Now, Bangladesh recently approached China for funding, and we rushed the foreign secretary to Dhaka to sort out matters. And I recall the paper saying that he's promised vaccines there. Coming to Western Front, you have the CPEC, enough has been said this morning, from Gwadar to Kashgar in Xinjiang province. Now, this is a railroad pipeline which will allow China to import crude into the hinterland, avoiding the Malacca Straits. Again, an outlet to the North Arabian Sea, which makes China a North Arabian Sea country. We, of course, oppose it for very good reason, as we have already discussed. So that is CPEC for you. Coming to Gwadar, this is the head hub and gateway to CPEC. And China, I am told, has got operational control for 40 years, which gives China a permanent presence there, overlooking Hormuz. Then you have the China-Pakistan nexus, India's energy security will be vulnerable since a large proportion of it comes from the Persian Gulf. China has given or is giving 8 Yuan-class submarines with AIP, 4 frigates. Of course, there are exercises that China and Pakistan will take, exercise Aman and Sea Guardian and so on and so forth. Chabhar, as you are aware, we've been operating the Chabhar port, Shahid Basti port. Recently, there was some information in the press saying that the rail project between Zahedan and Zaranj has been taken away from India, but I think the Iranian government has clarified. But what is, of course, alarming is that China has likely to invest $400 billion in Iran over the next 25 years in return for discounted oil and port facility. Now, this is bound to happen considering that Iran wants a lifeline and that we have been somewhat affected by the sanctions imposed by the US. So I'm told there are inputs which suggest that China is seeking to develop Jask port, which is west of Chabhar also. Now, then we have access to Dukam, which also has a dry dock. Now, Dukam, if we have access to Chabhar and Gwadar, so it will give us a sort of a strategic toehold. It's also close to Red Sea and Djibouti, which is further down south. China's first overseas base at Djibouti, as you can see at the top left hand. Now, this was supposed to be a logistic base, but I am told it's now become a fully operational base, operations base. And I am told that a jetty is almost ready for berthing an aircraft carrier. So that is the fast pace of development in Djibouti and in that area, North Arabian Sea. The French, of course, have a number of islands, territories in the Indian Ocean. Djibouti, Comoros, Reunion, I think Mayotte or whatever it's called. We have, of course, signed the logistics supply agreement, which will give us certain flexibility in operating in the Western Indian Ocean or Southwestern Indian Ocean. East Africa, of course, China is in Lamu and Bagamoyo. There were some problems earlier with both Kenya and Tanzania. He is building a trans-African network of rail and road to supply finished goods and to draw raw materials. Now, then of course, the maritime center of gravity shifts east towards the Bay of Bengal, Andaman Sea. The strategic importance, of course, has grown by leaps and bounds. This is where India's Act East policy meets China's westward push and is possibly the theater for conflicts in the maritime domain in the future, at least metaphorically speaking. Now, Indonesia, a good friend, has given us access to Sabang port in Aceh. As you can see, as is marked with the cross. That is only 19 nautical miles from Great Nicobar Island. So, and Sabang has a depth of 40 meters. Therefore, we are now, when Sabang is ready, we will be on both sides of Malacca Strait, and that gives us a tremendous strategic position to intercept whatever traffic there is and to monitor. Indonesia, of course, has a dispute with China over Scarborough Shoal, and that makes Indonesia a close friend. United States, of course, is a part of the Quad leader. We have signed the LIMOA or Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement. We can get access to Diego Garcia, Guam, Djibouti, Subic Bay. Malabar, with the 24th edition, will be held shortly in November. And the second edition of 2+2 also, Raksha Mantri and the Finance Minister. Japan, of course, is a member of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. She has been with us in excess of Malabar since 2015. We have signed the AXA, which is the Acquisition Cross-Servicing Agreement. And maybe we will get use of Japan's base at Djibouti. 2+2 dialogue in November. And Japan's dispute with China over Senkaku again makes her a better friend. Australia is part of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. There is possible inclusion in excess of Malabar later this year. We have signed the Maritime Logistics Supply Agreement. And Australia has been doing certain amount of pushback against China in the last couple of months. So you will see that we have signed logistics supply agreements with all 4 Quad members. The threat is China. How do we tame the dragon? Now, I think the fulcrum, the hub is the Andaman Nicobar Islands. The rest, of course, is there. Western Naval Command, Eastern Naval Command, or other Army and Air Force commands, definitely. The Andamans, of course, are closer to Southeast Asia than India. and average distance from India is 1,200 kilometers. Now, in 2016, China's acting ambassador during a seminar in Delhi said somebody could challenge the ownership of Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the future. I think that was a very loaded statement. Now, defense against Chinese aggression in North, I believe, lies in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean and more specifically the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So they're also springboard into South China Sea. The government a couple of years ago announced a 10-year defense plan with 5,650 crores. That, of course, is peanuts, will get you nothing. So therefore, we need to augment Andaman and Nicobar Command, find the finances for that. This time has come, I think, for a third fleet for the Navy based on the Andaman and Nicobar Command. China, and there has been media reports that they're planning for a fourth fleet in the Highline Island, which is also in South China Sea. An amphibious brigade, it's not a permanent thing. People keep changing. If we forever seem to learning amphibious warfare, we must get a upgrade to a amphibious division and possibly a special forces battalion, a combined battalion. We have to base submarines in the area to increase the operational radius, permanent basing of the Su-30 fighters and Jaguars with anti-ship missiles. We need to base P-8I Poseidon permanently there once the airports are upgraded. We have commissioned a naval air station in the north, Diglipur, as INS Kosa only thing last year. And we've had INS bars in Campbell Bay to monitor the Malacca Straits for the last couple of years. So therefore, if you see, we have an airbase at Diglipur, Port Blair, Karnik, and finally Campbell Bay. And this is definitely an unsinkable aircraft carrier or carriers, and it is our great wall against China. Now, recently when the Prime Minister inaugurated the underwater submarine cable project, he announced 10,000 crores for transshipment port at Campbell Bay. Also, SEZ and tourism projects. Now, if and when Campbell Bay gets ready, then I think she could provide it. Campbell Bay could provide competition to Colombo, because that is where transshipment is taking place now. Similarly, if we get bunkering and ship repair facilities, then maybe we could even threaten Hambantota in trade terms, because if the fueling stop is there in Campbell Bay, we would benefit. So we have to develop our outlying islands, unlike our land boundaries where we have been slow in creating infrastructure. So now, as you see, you can see the Campbell Bay is roughly midway between Hambantota and Singapore on the east-west maritime route. And when you are midway, I think you are perfect for a fueling stop or a pitch stop. And I'm sure we can draw away people from Hambantota, that is the ships which come there to fuel as a bunkering stop. Coming to miscellaneous issues, now this is the seabed allotted in India by the ISA, about 1,000 nautical miles south of Cape Comorin. This is a private company in China has got rights in the area indicated in red. So China wants to undertake joint exploration of seabed mining in the Indian Ocean. This is, of course, double standard because she wants to cooperate with the Indian Ocean, but not in South China Sea, where she opposes our drilling in Vietnam. Chinese trawlers are a common sight all over the world and close to our EZ. Now, you would have read in the paper, in the media, there are about 300 fishing boats off Ecuador recently. Many of them are involved in intelligence collection, monitoring missile firings off viral islands such as Prithvi, Agni, etc. Now, recently in December 2019, a Chinese research ship was sighted carrying a hydrographic and oceanographic survey of the Andamans. She had to be chased away by the Navy. What was she doing there? Apparently, she was collecting information for submarine operations, the profile of the water column, and possibly even the seabed. And they also use unmanned underwater vehicles. This is one such underwater vehicle which is being handled. Yuan Wong, this is a satellite tracking ship, came through the Malacca Straits just a week or two ago, and a constant surveillance by the Navy had to return back to the South China Sea. Now, this is a Hong Kong flagship. Okay, and she was detained in Kandla in February this year because she had declared an autoclave used for ballistic missile launcher as an industrial dryer. And this is not the first time this has happened. There was a ship earlier called Kuvul Son, which was carrying missile rings or something and was caught in Kandla several years back. Aircraft carriers. China has two aircraft carriers. One is Liaoning, which is a training carrier, and Shandong, which is the first indigenous carrier. Now, China's carrier is not required for the South China Sea because she has reclaimed several islands in the parallel Spratly group and has created airfields, airstrips, fighter aircraft, hangars, air defense system. These are obviously meant for the Indian Ocean, and you can expect a Chinese CBG maybe in 21 or 22. And so while the Chinese carriers coming in, our CDS goes and torpedoes the second indigenous carrier program. Okay, so much for whatever it is. Post-Galwan, Indian Navy has been a mission deployment mode in positions roughly indicated by the red triangle. I'm sure that they're doing much more than what is indicated. Joint exercises immediately after Galwan, one of our ships was South China Sea. We had earlier not participated in joint patrols, but this time we sent a ship there, which was objected to by China, and she was in constant touch with the US Navy. Then, of course, a number of joint exercises, including Japan, US and Nimitz carrier battle group, Australian Navy, and also Russian Navy, exercise Indra. So these are meant to give some sort of a message, joint exercises to various friends, including the Russians. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I think might is right, and China believes in this philosophy of denial and obfuscation. Master of double standard. 9-dash line, let me tell you, is arbitrary. It's got no legal bias. And China has also disregarded the UN tribal ruling of 2016, which went in favor of Philippines. So we need to constantly highlight China's flawed stand on clause 82. And at this rate, I think we may have to work on a new clause. So we need to push China to work within the rule-based international law. And we should not allow China to arm twist ASEAN countries into accepting a flawed code of conduct in South China Sea. I believe there is some effort to keep out countries such as US and India out of the South China Sea in this code. Now, of course, we need to build on a neighbors first policy. We cannot compete with China as far as funds go, but we need to highlight the Barrett debt trap. Not enough is written in our media, at least. India is definitely a benign power, and geography is India. China, of course, is an extra-regional power. Leverage Taiwan and Tibet issues, highlight the maltreatment of Uyghur Muslims, push for democracy for Hong Kong. After Galwan, I think we have to share reticence, and time for deference and soft approach is over. As someone said, distrust and verify. China cannot have unfettered access to our market, which is what is happening. Now, the COVID-19 and China's brazenness have united several nations, and nascent anti-China grouping is emerging. I think we have to decide where we stand and make our choice very well. Of course, time has come for us to participate in joint patrols. We cannot fight shine now. Quad may go up from quad to quad plus, as Mr. Rade mentioned, Vietnam and others. Militarization of the quad, it definitely has to come about and will come about. That's my gut feeling in seeing developments. Okay, so we need to help ASEANs in capacity building. Our projects, especially under the MEA, they suffer from time and cost overruns, whereas China is quick off the mark. So maybe we need a specialized foreign cooperation agency to steer projects abroad and finish them on time. And my last slide, I think there is a better need for better intelligence generation and sharing. More maritime surveillance satellites required. Some said that we had no inkling of what is happening in Galwan and all that. I don't know why, but we don't have adequate maritime surveillance satellites. Maybe we have some. Enhanced maritime domain awareness. Of course, we're well on our way, but it has to do even better. I think we need to encourage Indian companies to bid for maritime infrastructure projects abroad, like how the Chinese companies do. Our L&T, India Ports Global are perfectly capable. If L&T can build, dry docks in India and similar structure, why can't they do abroad? A better maritime governance structure is required in this country. Our maritime governance structure is totally land-oriented. Things have changed. Countries like China have gotten an ocean administration, but we are stuck in the rut. And in 2014, the BJP said that they will bring in a national maritime authority, a holistic approach. But nothing is seen or heard. Now, 2611 is not very far away, yet there is no national maritime authority. We have the NSA, we have a nautical advisor, we have a military advisor, but no national maritime authority. That is unfortunately the sad part, because maritime issues for some reason get a backstage. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I have come to the end of my talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Udai, for that very comprehensive presentation on why China is here, what its strategic objectives are, and how is it trying to achieve it. Obviously, by use of money, it's got deep pockets. And, it's also trying to overcome, obviously, the geographic disadvantage that it has, particularly in the Indian Ocean region, by acquiring bases, by collaborating with others, and to ensure that, its dream in the Indian Ocean region, as well as a blue water navy, is achieved in the next decade, if not more. Of course, there are many other points which we'll discuss during the question answer session. Again, thanking you. Let me move on to Professor Subramanya Raju, who will be talking to us about another perspective of India's maritime neighborhood, SAGAR, Blue Economy initiatives. All these are instruments of our own reach out in the neighborhood, which should give us a better profile in terms of engaging with our neighbors. Over to you, Adluri, all yours. 20 minutes, please.
Thank you for the invitation, for being with today's event. Presentation, it is going to be on how SAGAR and the blue economy can be linked up, and look at the link between SAGAR and the blue economy in the context of India's role in IOR. When we are talking about SAGAR and blue economy, I think we need to look at how important sea or relevance of sea. In my presentation, I look at the first part would be relevance of sea, the second part would be on SAGAR, third part on blue economy, how to develop a blue economy, and then finally I look at convergence of interest and the challenges and conclusion. When we talk about relevance of sea, which is very important, because unless we know the relevance of sea, no country will be in a position to look at the importance of sea. So this is something where, in the context of SAGAR or blue economy, I think we need to know about, our state needs to know how important sea, and there is a strong linkage between human development and the sea. Sea is seen as a resource, as a means of transportation, information, and connecting people and states. And sea is the high road to prosperity. It gives the mutual benefit, partnership, and lead to peace and stability and security. Therefore, we talk about SAGAR, which was enunciated by our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi. When you're talking about sea, which connects different people, cultures, civilizations, governments, and plays very constructive role in globalization, we need to look at how ocean should be seen as very important. And we know very well about 80% of capital cities of the countries and all major international trade centers and powerful economies are located on the coast. And 36% of the world's ocean are encompassed within the exclusive economic zone. Above all, we look at how much trade is traversed by sea. So I just leave some of the points which are not important, because you are all very familiar. You are very familiar with those aspects of how sea is relevant. And when you're talking about SAGAR is something, when we are talking about, very important, because oceans and worlds, waterways are global commons, and we always talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the concept of whole world as a family. And oceans are the lifelines of global prosperity. And India is very active in IOR, and IOR is also advocating for security and growth for the countries in Indian Ocean. As we know very well about it, in this sense, we look at the SAGAR from the concept of SAGAR, we look at how to relate with the blue economy, which is very, very important in the context of a globalized world. Because developing blue economy has become a global trend. Ocean has become an economic force in 21st century. And we know very well that 95% of trade travels through water. Thereby, we need to look at how ocean has become very important. But however, coastal and ocean economies are often blurred and not quantified. we hardly know the importance of revenue comes from sea. Thereby, countries like India are not have not given more emphasis on sea, and it is only they look at from the security point of view, but they need to look at how much revenue comes from sea. I think thereby we need to look at how do you quantify the revenue which comes from sea. And we know, irrespective of the size, thanks to UNCLOS, which gives exclusive economic zone about 200 nautical miles jurisdiction over waters, and the blue economy talks about to explore resources locally. This aspect is very, very important for developing countries, because there is a social unrest in most of these developing countries, and whereby when you look at this concept of blue economy, which advocates resources to be explored locally, I think this is somewhere we always try to look at how to avoid conflict within the society. I think this is also complemented to SDG, which is goal 14, which talks about, and it provides social economic benefits for the current and future generations. What are these sectors on blue economy when we are talking about? Is the coastal tourism, offshore oil and gas, deep sea shipping, ferry services, fisheries, inland waterways, transport, coastal protection, offshore energy, wind, tidal, solar, monitoring and surveillance, and biotechnology, desalination, and marine mining, etc. And when you're talking about this, by 2030, there is one estimation which talks about the future growth scenario at globally. Coastal tourism is going to be multiplied. Oil gas demand is going to be multiplied at twice. It's going to be increased twofold. Offshore wind is going to be 40 times more than what we are required at the moment. Seabed mining is going to be 10 times more than what we are doing. Shipping is going to be 4 times more, and fisheries is going to be more than what we are now exploring or fishing. Aquaculture is going to be 2 times more. And this is something where we are looking about, if that is the case, how do we look at it? On one hand, we are talking about blue economy advocates for sustainability. On the other hand, we are talking about the revenue to be generated more. How this is going to be synergy between these two? And that is something very important aspect when you are talking about blue economy. And when you're talking about this coastal governance index, I'm not talking about how China or other countries are now penetrating into Indian Ocean, as my previous speaker, Commodore Rao, was talking about it. But then I do look at how this coastal governance index is very, very important when we are talking about developing blue economy. We need to ensure that oceans are safe, secure, clean, and sustainably managed. And we can assess the capacity of the oceans to deliver benefits and resources sustainably by using Ocean Health Index. I think this is something where we need to look at when you're talking about developing blue economy. There are different parameters on which we talk about the Ocean Health Index: policy and institutional capacity, business environment for coastal activities, water quality, mineral and energy, land and living resources. I think this is something where we look at about how the countries, when they are talking about blue economy, they need to look at about the coastal governance. And environmental degradation, we know very well, unless we have environment is safe on waters, it is very difficult for any country to talk about the blue economy. And these are very important. We know very well in 2017, we had the collision between 2 cargo ships at Kamarajar port, and we have seen how much oil was mixed with water, which had an impact on environment. And on the other hand, we are talking about climate change and rise of sea level. If 1 meter sea level rise were to take place, it would displace 7 million people in India. And there is a case which talks about that 25 to 30% of mitigation of carbon dioxide emissions would result increase of 17% of poverty and 4% of GDP. If that, and GDP will be reduced. If that is the scenario, what is the, how India is going to emerge as a major power, as third or second or fourth economies in the world in the near future. And this is what we look at, that India needs to look at how to collaborate or work with other countries in Indian Ocean to talk about how to protect the ocean or sea. That is very, very important. Let us look at the experience of developing countries with regard to developing blue economy. Malaysia is having national blue ocean strategy. Seychelles has blue bonds policy. Mauritius has an ocean economy action plan. Philippines has a pharmacy's drug discovery program, which is focused on bioactivities from marine organisms. Indonesia is talking about the global maritime fulcrum, aims at taking the country to the center stage of the world maritime scene, and it wants to create new investment opportunities for foreign participants, domestic port developments, operation, etc., etc. And this is something where we are talking about how to look at in the India, how India is going to contextualize SAGAR and blue economy and improve its relation with other countries. Of course, the countries in Indian Ocean most of the countries have recognized India as a security provider, but still India has so many challenges which are going to be addressed in the near future. In India, which our Prime Minister was talking about, blue chakra in Indian flag symbolizes blue economy. We have demonstrated during tsunami how India was, helping the neighboring countries. And, the fishing with the satellites use, which are going to identify areas in deep seas, abundant presence of fisheries through the satellites, which will really help fishermen in saving time and fuel, and will have more fish. And desalination technology for Lakshadweep, which was taken by LNG, and Project Mosam, though it was trying to look at reconnecting India's cultural maritime linkages with its traditional trade partners along the Indian Ocean, launched in June 2014, but it is yet to be in operational. And Sagarmala project, which is now trying to look at how to construct ports, coastal infrastructure, and improve the connectivity within the country. And India supported Mauritius, Seychelles, Maldives, and in terms of maritime security, and thereby India was advocating for SAGAR. So there is a synergy between SAGAR and blue economy, which were taken by India consciously advocating with the countries in IOR. And thereby India is looking at, in terms of disaster management, India was very successful. But in terms of connectivity, in terms of, protecting the ocean from different threats which emanate either from water or from land, are very bigger challenge, whereby India needs to have collaboration with the neighboring countries in Indian Ocean. So when you talk about the final, I conclude by looking at ocean belongs to everyone. Now India is not talking about Indian Ocean. There's a non-resident country should not come to Indian Ocean, because India is also now looking at going beyond Indian Ocean. So now this is a trend which we look at from Indian point of view. Ocean belongs to everyone, and global commons not to be seen as contested commons, but it should not be controlled or command of commons by a very few states. And most of the little states wish to see zone of peace rather zone of conflict. And all these countries in particularly developing countries are now concentrating on developing blue economy, which would avoid conflict over resources, since the blue economy encourages to explore resources locally. And oceans are lost frontier and need to be careful in exploring resources. And this is what we look at in different sectors, where India needs to look at how to develop blue economy for its own, and also try to help other countries in Indian Ocean, either in terms of investment, in terms of transfer of technology, or sharing the technology and exploration sector, where India can also help the neighboring countries. And India needs to have ministry for blue economy exclusively. And since we talk about 21st century has been called as the century of the sea, I think this is something where India needs to go further, to be very active in developing blue economy. And oceans represent a new economic frontier for growth and development and investment. So economic growth and ocean health should go together. This is when we look at about. And so we need to look at that. One can choose friends and not neighbors. So hence, this is very important for countries like India. Look at how to coordinate with the neighboring countries to talk about shifting from power politics to prosperity, for protecting the sea lanes of communication, freedom of navigation. And that is what we look at. And this is what really make India to be more confident, more convenient, more safe in terms of coordinating with the neighboring countries, in terms of looking at security and growth for all in the region, bringing blue economy as one of the aspects in its foreign policy to execute, to develop, to coordinate with the neighboring countries. So I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Subramaniam Raju. Again, it was another wonderful presentation which complemented what the previous speaker brought out in terms of how India needs to safeguard its interests, at least in its backyard. Now, what it traditionally considers as its backyard is where there's a lot of encroachment that is taking place. And here is where some of the things that you discussed hold us, give some promise, whether it is blue economy, where India can take a lead, and or whether it is SAGAR, which is the stated statement and intent of the government, which is security and growth for all in the region, but that can have a tag off through the maritime route. And of course, the SDG 14 that you mentioned, all these are integrated with one another. And India, because of its relative economic strength and also the geographic advantage that it enjoys, would need to leverage its relations with its neighbors and also use both the soft power and the geographic advantage that it has for furthering the region's growth. We need not worry about competition with China, but we need to worry about what is happening in our backyard and come to their assistance in promoting their own clout. So in terms of maintaining the oceans, you made valid points, because oceans today are dumped with all kinds of chemical waste, plastics and all that. And some of the studies which have come about are indeed shocking. You just saw last month how Indian Coast Guard and the Navy and Sri Lankan Navy had to fight a fire on empty New Diamond, within the exclusive economic zone. If this was not tackled in a timely manner, it would have resulted in serious economical disaster, because the ship was carrying something like 2 metric million tons of oil. So there is a lot of potential for India to be in the lead. And the other point that you brought out about the famous blue chakra within our national flag should lead us to the hub and spoke situation of being at the center, of moving out and reaching out to our maritime neighbors to help them in their own prosperity and development. So with this, let me move on to the next speaker, Balasubramanian, who will now cover another dimension of both the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific. And Bala, you have 20 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I would like to first express my gratitude to my director, Commodore Vasan sir, and Chennai Centre for China Studies for the opportunity. My special thanks also goes out to Sri Rudrap Heblika sir of Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, and Sri Shashi Nair sir, Press Institute of India, for making this happen. My presentation is going to be about China's forays in the Indo-Pacific. I have basically devised my presentation based on temporal scale, the past, present, and the future. How the Indo-Pacific happened to be the 21st century's geopolitical contested zone, and what is actually happening right now with China's actions, and what is going to be the grand strategy. So without taking much time, moving into my presentation, the first is how Indo-Pacific has now become a very strategic reality despite the differential perception that each country may hold and how it sees the Indo-Pacific. So it has now today, Indo-Pacific, as we all know, it has become an axiom. It has been interpreted differently by various countries in their outlook based on their vision documents and etc. But definitely the rise of China across the Indian Oceans as well as the Pacific Ocean, it has significantly challenged the security umbrella which was established, I would call, after the end of the Second World War, and which got even more strengthened post the end of the Cold War. The emergence of re-emergence of Indo-Pacific as a new geographic space or a strategic theater, it seeks to bring together both the oceans of Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific Ocean, representing a new strategic reality in this 21st century. So if we could recall back in 1971, Sri Lanka was the one which first proposed a notion of Indian Ocean as a zone of peace. It was called IOZOP, but it was more, it spoke about how the Western powers and the establishment of how they tried to establish their foreign bases. Interestingly, then what happened was China then stood with countries like India in opposing bases in the Indian Ocean, actually. But now it is far from truth, and it's a far cry, because right now China itself is strategically now foraying into the Indian Ocean and including the Indo-Pacific, establishing bases in Gwadar and Djibouti. So as a legacy of Soviet Union, Russia still continues to be, or it has never ceased to be, an Indo-Pacific power, because it is both the part of the a geographical blessing, both it's a part of Europe as well as Asia. Today it holds joint exercises with China in the Indo-China Sea, though popularly called as the South China Sea, and it also simultaneously holds a trilateral exercise with China and South Africa and the Indian Ocean. The situation in the Indo-China Sea, which is popularly called the South China Sea, is even more complex, because various parties or claimants are pitted against one another, with China with its what I call the irredentist 9-dash line engulfing the entire exclusive EEZ, the exclusive economic zone, of several others. But despite that, China has yet to produce a very clear line with exact coordinates on a large-scale map in support of its claim, which is seen to be a cartographic aggression by China. Earlier in 1974, the China's actions was it took the Parcel Islands from the South Vietnam, and with the US in retreat, turning a Nelson eye to it. And later, what happened subsequently, China also took the Scarborough Shoals in 2012, using the popularly called the swarming techniques involving the fishing boats at Titu Islands against the Philippines, which happened in 2019, despite the defense treaty between the United States and the Philippines. In general terms, what is happening now is a scramble in the South China Sea, which is more about the fishing rights, raise and aggrandizement for natural resources, the domination of trade and energy slops, the sea lanes of communication, etc. So what is actually happening is that there is fundamentally, the world is today undergoing a fundamental transformation. And there are several factors to the emerging uncertainty, because certain issues like the traditional and non-traditional security threats have grown in magnitude. The specter of terrorism, including the maritime terrorism, cross-border terrorism, they continues to pose a challenge to the peace and prosperity. The geopolitical considerations are also increasingly driving the trade and investment decisions. On the one hand, there has been the geo-economic forces unleashed by China's economic rise, which are trying to redefine the geostrategic landscape in the Indo-Pacific. As well as post-COVID-19, what is also happening is that China is escalating its actions in the wake of post-COVID-19, creating a catastrophe.
Bala, 1 minute, sorry for intervening. Hope you have no more slides, because there's only one slide here.
Yes, sir.
You're not forgotten to advance them.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So what is happening is that China is escalating actions in the wake of COVID-19. Is a calculated, I would call a strategic division, including the risk. So in the Indo-Pacific, what is happening is there has been increasing tensions between China and the US, including on the one hand China and the Australia, China and India on the other hand. These are significantly building momentum. So as a geopolitical partnership, the relevance of Quad now is now a set of Indo-Pacific policy guidelines has taken momentum. So the ways to empower it immediately and make it as a very resilient grouping is a much need of the hour. So interestingly, 10 days ago, what happened was Germany came out, Germany's Federal Foreign Office has came out with a drafted 40-page long set of what they call the Indo-Pacific policy guidelines. So where it adopted strategy for the Indo-Pacific region. With this, Germany also became the second European nation to do so, formerly France being the first one which came out with such. And interestingly, when we go through the 40-page document, the Berlin's document includes the Indo-Pacific guidelines include maritime security cooperation, human rights, the diversification of Germany's economic partnership in the Indo-Pacific for it and for the regional partners. Significantly, it has added a word which is called to avoid unilateral dependencies. I think this is a very significant word to be taken note of. On the face of it, what now seems to be is that Germany may look like a simple economic and trying to make a economic and geopolitical proposition. But overall, what it can be seen as the construed reflection of the growing mood of the distemper towards China throughout Europe, the wave which is happening in Europe. So the second part I'd like to move is that what has happened? What has happened is that the Chinese assertiveness, it has given way to plain aggression, both in its speech and action, which can be seen through the wide gamut of spectrum of issues that China is trying to unleash. There has been Beijing's resistance to international calls for investigation into the COVID-19 pandemic and China's culpability factor into it, and its aggressive posturing in the Indo-China Sea, which is the South China Sea. What happened in the Hong Kong and the security law? What is happening with the Taiwan, the trade and technology disputes with the US, something to name a few. So, though the implications of China's victory at the World Health Organization of the diplomatic campaign against the inquiry into the origin of pandemic fizzled out, there seems to be, it has not fizzled out. The global response has not been lost on the Indo-Pacific region as well. That is the point I'm trying to bring out. Also, what has also subsequently happened is that there has been a significant re-strengthening, I would call, of the Quad, definitely, which has seen some serious signals across the world. Next, I'm dividing, going to the third part, which is about dividing India in the Indo-Pacific and China in the Indo-Pacific. China, as you all know, the motivations and intentions behind China to be in the Indo-Pacific is, it is drawn towards the Indo-Pacific strategy to satisfy its economic and energy requirements like India. The US presence in the region has also contributed to China's increasing interest in the Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific has also got many critical sea lanes of communication that are very, very crucial for China's energy transportation to propel its economic growth. China has also been using its strategy to root out and find a very permanent position in the Indian Ocean region because the area is very viable for long-term infrastructure development to reduce the transport dependency and logistic dependency through the Straits of Malacca. And the more availability of choke points along the sea lanes of communication like the Sunda Strait, the Lombok Strait, the Mumbai Strait, which connect China to the mainland, is also a contributing factor for China's insecurity in the Indo-Pacific region. Though the similarities between India and China are not only in their size and population, but also in their what we call the national interest. So both of them have a large appetite and have a large economic drive. China to maintain its to continue to maintain its global position. It's very significant that China is to maintain a posture or a presence in the Indo-Pacific region. So maritime security is also an essential to both as well as India and China. So these are all the various motivations that have led both the countries to invest time, energy, and capital in the Indo-Pacific region. So next, coming back to what is India's stake and what does India have in the Indo-Pacific region? So to keep up with the pragmatic nature of foreign policy, Indo-Pacific region is very significant for India's Act East policy. So in this, the Australia strategic position in the region also makes it important for India's Act East policy. So for Australia, it is also very significant to reduce its dependence on China and the strengthening security ties with ASEAN, deepening cooperation with the islands in the Indian and Pacific Ocean. In fact, significantly with the Prime Minister's Narendra Modi's engagement with Indian diaspora in Australia, Fiji, Mauritius, and South Korea was an attempt to highlight the historical cultural linkages, which is essential to increase India's role in the region. So it is very clear that the present government wants to revamp the Indian economy by attracting more foreign investments, since the majority of the trade in the region are through the seas, resolving the present and future maritime threat by giving more attention to the Indo-Pacific construct is of very significant and prime importance. So next, moving on to the security dilemma. So for both the dilemma in the Indo-Pacific as well as the Indian Ocean region as a whole is that for India and China to maintain a forward presence in the maritime domain, it has acquired greater salience to their national security policy, also to including achieving a situational awareness in the area of strategic interest. For China, this means what it entails is that it seeks to have a presence in the Indian Ocean. So for India, having the Chinese naval presence in the Pacific Ocean becomes critical for its strategic deterrence against China. China already having consolidated its hold over the Indochina, the South China Sea by militarizing artificial islands. And now China is now trying to set its sight on the Indian Ocean. So it is only a question of when and how that it is going to happen. So I think India in this region has to be more proactive. So Indian Ocean cannot be treated as India's own, but should draw attention to the China's intention. Having acquired the leasing rights to Pakistan Gwadar for 40 years, the Chinese actions in the region includes acquired the Pakistan Gwadar port for 40 years, the Greece Prairies port for 35 years, the section of Djibouti port for 10 years, Sri Lanka's Hambantota port for 99 years, 20% of Cambodia's total coastline for 99 years, including the Maldivian island of Faidu, Finru for 50 years. Beijing now including trying to pressure Myanmar to raise China's stake in the Kiapu deep water port in the Bay of Bengal to lease it for 99 years as well. So at least we have to see how it takes shape. The Chinese base in Myanmar would also further threaten India's naval dominance in the Bay of Bengal and heighten its sense of encirclement by the Chinese Navy. Even in the Western Indian Ocean, Beijing is also trying to eye the Mombasa in Kenya, which because for China it can be used as a gateway to East Africa, because the 55% of around 55% of foreign debt is owned by China. So in this geometry of geopolitics, I would call, since there is a Quad is emerging, parallelly there is also a counter Quad which is emerging. So in July 2020, if you remember and recall, China and Iran have forged a 25-year comprehensive partnership. It should be a concern for states in the Indo-Pacific region, because China has already found a partner to fuel its regional ambitions in the region. Joining in are Russia, Pakistan, and along with now Turkey has been the new entrant. So with this, the Iran, China, Russia, Pakistan grouping is the significant counter to the Quad, what I would like to call the counter Quad, for the Quad grouping, which consists of India, US, Japan, and Australia. So what can be India's role in actions? This is my assessment and consideration. So considering the India's role in action, I think still India's shy of calling it as a military alliance, but there are it can take a more calibrated way of ensuring that the geopolitical balance is maintained in the region. It can be India should take into calculation, the strategic calculation, the basic assumption that in the foreseeable future this Indo-Pacific region is set to face, because we already what some geopolitical observers call the new Cold War, or a heightened or a sharpened strategic contestation can take place involving China on the one hand, India or a group of nations on the other hand. So this has to be taken into the strategic calculations of the policymakers in India. And second, the Quad also needs to refine its approach towards ASEAN, because none of the ASEAN's, the 10 members are inclined to join the group, but I think several are testing waters and maybe open to forging side relationship. Significantly, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines may be interested in deepening their strategic cooperation. This can be looked on. And to enhance its diplomatic and strategic gravitas, the Quad should also seriously work on strengthening the pillars of bringing into account the economic and technological cooperation, because action and actual delivery, rather than merely high decibel or high sounding announcements, would not help. So this can be taken into account. The third aspect, the considerations can be the Quad can no longer ignore the interest of several European powers like France, UK, and Germany, and the European itself as a whole, to contribute towards a balancing power in the Indo-Pacific. Because France has a significant asset in the Reunion Island. They all have assets such as the political strength, the diplomatic acumen, as well as the existing naval and maritime connections can be, including the reservoirs of knowledge, can be significantly leveraged by India. So the most significant point I would like to bring is that subtle but significant changes is also happening in the Russia-India equilibrium and equations, which should be factored in, because with the successful visit of Russia's Far East in early September by Prime Minister Modi, who's trying to strengthen the investment and technological engages to give Indian companies a chance to develop the resources in the Russian Far East region. Russia is amenable key to reduce its overdependence on China also. So there is a two-way need for both. So drawing in Russia as an Indo-Pacific power would also help in improving the regional balance as far as India is concerned. So the low-hanging fruits for India, I think a couple of points before I finish I would like to make. I think operationalization of the trilateral highway linking India, Myanmar, and Thailand. It can also be extended to, I would say, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. It should come up, India should come up, and the group of nations should come up with a more attractive substitute to a proposed project for digital connectivity between India and ASEAN. And the correct balance has to be maintained in the security development matrix in the Indo-Pacific in favor of development, because Ultimately, regional initiatives like promoting possibilities of cooperation, the blue economy in the domain is going to be a priority, at least for the next couple of decades going to come. The missing linkages in all these Quad initiatives is about the business and the regional conference of industry leaders that can harmonize the ideas and craft a few bankable projects. It would be very worthwhile to bring in that. So on a closing note, I would like to conclude by saying, given the complexities of the post-COVID world order that we are going to see, India's role and India's action and the India's call, what India is going to do in the Indo-Pacific region, and its scope of engagement with in strategic partnership with other players, it is going to define India's role, standing, positioning in the new world order. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala. Again, that complements the presentation made by Commodore Udai Rao as well as Dr. Udai Raju in terms of getting a total picture on where we stand in terms of Indian Ocean region developments and the Indo-Pacific developments. Both are issues of great importance to India, which is a maritime nation, and that's one factor which has not been acknowledged so far. We continue to be a maritime nation, and there are a lot of initiatives that are due from our side to assert our maritime characteristics. Many seem to think that our joining the Quad is only a security dimension. It is not exactly so, because considerable traffic from India to and from India also passes through the South China Sea waters. That's something like 1/3 of what passes through other waters. So you have a strategic interest, you have a commercial interest, and you have an interest in ensuring that you have the right kind of leverages for balancing the strategic power play that's emerging out there, both in the Indian Ocean region as well as the Indo-Pacific. Balan, I'll request you to kindly get back to the chat box and look at the questions and identify the speaker to whom it's addressed. Also, the priority, like I said earlier, is for the youngsters who are here, and the other questions can be taken up towards the last. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rishi Atreya has asked, Commodore Udai Rao talked about maritime policies of the Modi government. Do political parties make much of a difference, or else is there a common trajectory of India's security policy and diplomacy?
Yeah, if I've understood you correctly, I think political parties do make a big difference. You see, as far as this present government is concerned, Prime Minister Modi, if you recall, his first outstation visit after taking over was to INS Vikramaditya. Thereafter, if I remember correctly, he had a commanders conference at sea. These are indicators. And then if you see, he's also in the civilian stream. I would think Prime Minister Modi is our Mahan, because certain amount of cobwebs of sea blindness have been removed, because there is a SAGAR Mala project which relates to civil maritime projects. Now, if you see, then of course he spoke of Indo-Pacific. Now, you must study all the outcome documents of his visits abroad or leaders into this country. You will find the common thread is maritime security, maritime cooperation, information sharing in all these documents with whatever country. So he has realized that if 97% of our trade is going by sea, by volume, and 72% by value, then maritime security and economy are linked. Make in India or things like that are all linked to the seas. If you don't have security, you won't have economy, and Indian interest will not improve. Therefore, I think he's very correctly said that the enunciated various policies, including SAGAR, second growth for all in the region. Now, recently there was this Japanese ship which ran aground of Mauritius. We immediately sent a Coast Guard team there, along with some other people, to contain the oil spill. So this is what makes us stand apart. So we have a vision for maritime domain, whether it is in the in the civil sector or in the naval and Coast Guard sector. I think we are doing very well. Mozambique, there was a cyclone. We were the first to reach the area. Okay, don't forget about tsunami. It's a thing beyond. But the fact is that I think this government, the government also spoke about blue economy, if you remember. And after the Prime Minister spoke about in maritime interest, that the Navy came out with a military maritime strategy document. So all these indicators of Sagar Malas, Operation Samudra Setu, we sent ships to all the countries in the neighborhood to get our diaspora back. After the COVID broke out. Operation Sagar, we sent one in number ship Kesari to all the island countries carrying all COVID supplies, food, etc. 23,000 kilometers she sailed to deliver these two. I think there is somewhere a great vision. This was not there. Now see the other way. 1965, when the war broke out, we were prohibited from crossing a certain latitude towards Makaran coast. Our hands were held back. That is not happening today, as far as I can see. So these are, of course, that's a part of history, but I think that is a short answer to his question, that this government is more switched on. This government is mentioned by National Maritime Authority in 2014. This is where they have failed. There is some strong opposition to National Maritime Authority. That is the point.
Thank you. Thank you, Commodore. There's another question posed to Commodore Udai Rao, sir, by Ms. Arundhati. She has asked, can different practices in maritime domain and different point of views on free and open Indo-Pacific by Quad countries be termed as a prominent hindrance into making a formal alliance? The second one, how likely or unlikely Djibouti is going to be next playground of superpowers?
Okay, as far as different countries are concerned, each country will have different interests, different viewpoints. Okay, so but what the good thing is that what has brought all of us together is China. In fact, if you see, we must thank China for bringing about maritime awareness in this country. Otherwise, we don't have any maritime consciousness at all. China, with a surge, has forced us to look at the maritime domain. So the common factor is China. Okay, even for Quad countries or others as well, whether it's US, Japan, Australia, it is the threat of China. Now, we may have different perceptions, but don't forget, we exercise with most countries back to back virtually. Our ships are busy, they are deployed 90% of the time. They have no breathing time because we have committed more than what we can physically handle. So we have, Varuna with the French, Indra with the Russians, Malabar with the Americans, Simbex with Singapore. What does this mean? That we are comfortable, that our people know each other, there's interoperability, our communication systems are working. We have signed certain documents such as the G-SOMIA and all that. So therefore, I think whatever the perceptions of each country may be different, but these exercises bring us together. So when the balloon goes up, if at all, then we are better prepared to take on a challenge. At least now it is China. I think we are better prepared.
Thank you, Commodore. The second question, I think it can be taken up by...
Djibouti. What is the question about Djibouti?
How likely, unlikely Djibouti is going to be next playground of superpowers?
See, the good thing about Djibouti is a strategic location. Okay, Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. So that's the crossroads. Okay, and the other important is you got US there, you got a Japanese base there, you got a French base there, and then you got a Chinese base there. Okay, they may be around close, but basically it is money for Djibouti. Okay, and Djibouti quite happy to get the money. So a lot of area has been occupied by forces. Now China has built a jetty for an aircraft carrier. So you will well realize that the aircraft carrier is going to come and berth finally in Djibouti. So there will be, avenue for I don't recall the word she said. What is it? Inter-super play. What is it? What is superpower play? I may not use the same word, but definitely there will be a higher, echelons of operation, and there may be some bit of interaction as well. Some not so good, some good. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, sir. I request the next question to be taken up by the Commodore Vasan, sir. It is posed by Colonel Hari Ransar to the Naval Fraternity. I have been hearing about developments Andaman and Nicobar as a maritime hub for the last 3 decades plus. Even now, I am not too confident it would be developed as envisaged because investment is so huge. So we need to prioritize needs. How should we do this?
On this issue, I think to complement what Commodore Udai Rao has presented, he was talking about a figure of some 5,650 crores to be invested there. He also mentioned in his presentation that, China has now permanently anchored aircraft carriers in the South China Sea. That is, these are the rocks and reefs which are converted as islands, which has been militarized. Now, India has not done the same thing. He was mentioning 542 plus islands which are there, which are right there at the mouth of the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, and we did precious little. We always appear to be sensitive to what China would think if we developed infrastructure. The same story along the LAC. For a long time, we continued to be sensitive about what China would think if we added to our infrastructure, roads, and facilities. China doesn't care. So it's time for us now to go ahead and activate various Air Force bases and others which are there in Car Nicobar, and the other airfields which he mentioned from north to south axis, which is there. Please remember, we also have Coco Islands. Not that it's a great security threat, but every time when you have your missile launches, in addition to the telemetry equipped ships, you find that a shipload lands in Coco. It just got a small airstrip, but it's enough to sustain an aircraft landing there with monitoring equipment. So even when Coco Island was there, we did not make too much of noise. So it's time to get out of the shell and go ahead and have everything which is there as far as the island defenses are concerned. It is your forward defense in terms of thwarting China's advances into the Indian Ocean region. I don't know why we are hesitant. Remember, he also mentioned about one of the Chinese officials talking about somebody laying a claim to Andaman Nicobar in the future. We should shun them on these kind of statements which are made. And because, consciously, we said, we are going to use the word China PO Economic Corridor. We also said instead of South China Sea, we'll use Indo-China in our dialogue. The idea is to try and put pressure as much as you can. So coming back to Colonel Hariharan's question, it's time. When I was in Port Blair just a year ago to attend a conference in one of the universities, they said BSNL stands for Bhai Saab Nahi Lagega. That was the situation. Hold on, sir, please. No, nothing on the mic. It's only on the chat box.
Priority.
Sir, no time. Okay, I'll come back to you. So the priority now obviously is something that is dictated by money. The fact that we spend money to ensure that it is connected through this underwater sea cable is a step in the right direction. The ports that were now mentioned as something that can be developed for bunkering is another point. The money is required. You don't have to do it on your own. Get other countries which are interested, which have given you exchange options, whether it is through Lemova, whether it is Singapore, whether it's Australia, whether it is USA, whether it's France, which has an interest in Indian Ocean, have a common pool for development. So this is what is there. Due to time constraints, I will not be able to elaborate further on this, but we'll come back to this maybe tomorrow when we have another panel discussion.
Thank you, sir. The next question is posed to Commodore Udai Rao, sir. Subramanya sir has asked, China has internalized Alfred Thayer Mahan's treaties about naval power as Tianxia, which is everything under the sun, demands global power projection unlike India's. Therefore, India hasn't placed the same emphasis on the Navy. However, the Chinese Navy's humongous expansion puts pressure on India. We have gone for SSBNs and SSNs. How smartly can we build up Indian Navy more in order to deter the Chinese Navy?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah. So, we definitely require a platform. There's no doubt. More platforms, definitely. But the issue is, it is not just about number of platforms. It's about platform, sensor combination, and networking. We have the satellite called Rukmini, which is actually a force multiplier. Okay. And as Commodore Vasan said, we also get some Basically, what we want is that information sharing, intelligence sharing. I think we are headed in the right direction because we have a number of intelligence sharing arrangements at different levels, different countries. Okay, one is about white shipping information, for example. I am told it's with some 25 countries. We are supposed to have a NSLA trilateral intelligence sharing with Sri Lanka and Maldives, which is supposed to extend to Seychelles and Mauritius. I don't know where it stands currently. Okay, so there is intelligence sharing, there is information sharing on different levels, and also maritime domain awareness. Now we have created what is called the IMAC at Delhi. This shares information in Singapore or with Bahrain or in Africa. So there is a flow of information. This is manned by the Navy and the Coast Guard. So you have the platform, you have the sensor, you have the weapon, you are network centric. We're also looking at satellites for maritime surveillance, ocean surveillance. We may already have some. So all these, when they are linked, these act as a multiplier of effort, and we will be able to do, as he said, smartly take on our enemies. But platforms also being built. Our indigenous aircraft carrier Vikrant is likely to be commissioned in 2022. It's been delayed slightly. Indigenous aircraft carrier 2, some say it is called Vishal. I don't know. I don't think that is the correct name. But that recently has, there's been some problem about, some controversy about it. I'm not saying problem. I'm sure it will be resolved. So we're building aircraft carriers. We are building our own submarines, nuclear submarines. Arihant is already operational. Chakra is on lease, right? We are building 6 Scorpion submarines. We're building follow-on to Kolkata class ships. So you will find that I think, by and large, we are a good Navy, network Navy. We have the right, but definitely we require, I think we get the smallest pie of the defense pie, for the smallest part. So naturally we have to cut our coat as per what we have. We definitely require more money. When somebody said about Port Blair, for example, Andaman Nicobar, it's very correct. Now, Niti Aayog, at least on the commercial side, they're looking at it. They have an island development plan. The submarine cable project was approved recently. And the fact that in 2017, D.K. Joshi was placed there, a former CNS, was a good indicator that we are looking at developing Andaman Nicobar. I mean, there's no time for that. Some people are talking, even making Port Blair headquarters for Quad. That may not come about. So you can see that I think our Navy is by and large in safe hands. I'm not saying that everything is taped up. No. We require more. We are going in for now UAVs, armed UAVs, Predators, Sea Guardians. We want more, P-8 Indias. We already got 8. We're getting 6 more. But if we use all of them in the Ladakh area, what are we going to use at sea? That's another issue. So I think we are okay. There's a smart way of doing things. But everything depends on how much money we get.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Tambat has posed a question to Commodore Udai Rao, sir, based on his presentation where he spoke on the National Maritime Authority. He has asked, what could be the major policy initiatives by government in this respect? How to protect both the maritime and strategic interest of India while building healthy relations in Indian Ocean region and Pacific Ocean?
Yeah. See, the issue about maritime domain is that it always seems to come as an adjunct to something else. Okay, influence events on land. But now, with China coming into the Indian Ocean region, at least for us, maritime domain is very, very important. Otherwise, also for trade. Now, the issue is what can we do about it? National Maritime Authority, why do we require it? 2611. I'm sure you followed it on TV and elsewhere. What was the response? Was there a commission of inquiry after that? Was there any changes made in the intelligence hierarchy? As I am concerned, nothing has been made. We have not learned the lessons. Are we safer today? No. Why? Because if you go to a number of stakeholders in the maritime field and coastal field, it depends on how you count. It could range from 50 to 45. So any proposal that is sent will get footballed around various ministries and nobody will take the cake or nobody will take the bull by its horn. The issue is simple. Let us say fisheries. Fisheries comes under Ministry of Agriculture. Okay, so the boss is the Minister of Agriculture. What does he understand about fisheries? So the BJP government said we will get a separate department or Ministry of Fisheries. Nothing has happened. So we require someone, National Maritime Authority, not one person. Earlier we spoke on National Maritime Advisor. But the BJP government, the president, I think it was 16th Lok Sabha, he said that we will have a NMA in position soon. That NMA is not to be seen or heard of. Why has it been delayed? It is, I think, 13 years since 2018, 2008, 2611. It's enough time to create a maritime authority, and it will be from different people, different expertise. They all come together, and it will be a permanent body. Today, what happens is that the Ministry of Shipping does what it wants, Ministry of something else does it want, Fisheries does something else. But there are security implications. Let us say this Colombo thing. Nobody is looking at this, that our containers are being shipped there because there is no holistic approach. So we want a National Maritime Authority. The government has agreed, okay, to bring all actors on stage so that we have a holistic policy, whether it is Indo-Pacific policy, whether it is blue economy. The people who are currently sitting in Delhi have no nodding acquaintance with the maritime domain. They may not have seen the sea, may not have seen a ship, may not have been on a ship to sea or spent even a night at sea. They will tell you what's to be done. I have not been I have just been a director of naval intelligence, And you will find that sometimes very difficult to get things through the defense ministry. So that is the bottom line. And I don't mean any disrespect to anybody. It is just that they don't know. So somebody in the Kargil has said, let us get a separate cadre of security profession in the civil service. IAS, IPS, we must have a security service. Nothing has happened to that proposal, but it will be good if we have somebody who has some acquaintance with security issues, maritime issues, so that otherwise, let me assure you, we are always focused on J&K and Northeast. 100% we'll have another 2611 if you don't wake up. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. The last question for the day before we wind up the plenary session 2 for day 1 is by Arundhati. Ms. Arundhati, she has asked, Commodore Udai Rao, sir, your point of view on the implications of Stena Impero-like incident in the future on the maritime cooperation among countries and also on the regional security.
Oh, I didn't get that. What is Stena?
Stena Impero-like incident. I think the Iranian boat, I suppose.
I'll take this up if required.
Yeah, I am not up to date. I don't want to.
All right, I'll take this up. Essentially, I think the reference is being made to Stena Maria, a ship, which Iran got involved, a UK flagged ship, and there was international discussions on how the crew were to be handled, how many were to be detained, etc. This is something that will constantly be faced by the merchant navy. If you go back to the Iran-Iraq war, I remember that one of the former naval officer by name Commander Grival, he was commanding one of the merchant navy ships, and he got caught in the crossfire, and a missile which was fired hit his ship, and his bridge was blown off, and he died in the process. So this is where there is a requirement for concerted international action for ships to come together, like they did in terms of anti-piracy, because it peaked in 2005, and you found that many of the people were held hostage, and an amount of something like $13.5 million was paid to secure the release of hostages who were taken over by pirates. So the international community came together, and they had patrols along the Somali coast and the East African coast, and they were able to contain it. Likewise, when there is an international situation like the one which happened, when America was trying to impose sanctions on Iran, Iran threatened and said, I am going to block Straits of Hormuz, by mining the entire Straits of Hormuz and by challenging the movement of ships there. That was one of the reasons why it led to the incidents such as the Stena Maria, which is quoted by Arundhati. So I think here is where we need to have proactive association to see that this does not go out of hand. Of course, Iran also came under pressure, and they were able to release many people on the ship who were not directly involved. And they tried to say that this was a violation of the maritime area and the sterile areas which were there. But this is something I'm not going to discuss the entire contours of this incident, because it's beyond the scope of this, except to say that there is a need, whether it is Quad, whether it is BIMSTEC, whether it's ASEAN, whether it is SAARC, whether it is those three, to come together to prevent such kind of incidents, and also to have a mechanism that works, in times of crisis. We saw how Sri Lankan Navy, Indian Navy, Indian Coast Guard came together to contain this problem of a ship that was about to burst and leak something like 2 million metric tons of oil. So likewise, the Udai Rao mentioned to you about the maritime domain awareness. I think that has matured. The Gurgaon thing that we have outfit now has invited the attention of many navies around the world, not just America. Even France in the Raisina dialogue last year expressed an interest to be part of this. And as was brought out by Commodore Udai Rao, we have many more navies who have shown interest in the white shipping, exchange of information scheme. And we also have in Singapore the famous Data Fusion Center, where Indian naval officers are located. Likewise, the IFC, the International Fusion Center in Singapore, again naval officers are posted. And we have the RECAP, which came in because of piracy, where again Indian Coast Guard officers are posted. So all these agencies need to work in tandem to ensure that there is total transparency in the movement of ships. Coming to this, a brief comment on what Udai Rao brought out about the P8I. The P8I are being effectively used today along the LAC, thanks to the excellent electronic equipment that we have. But he raised his concern to say, if you're going to constantly use this only along the LAC, what happens to the maritime domain? Last year, the Chief of Naval Staff brought out in the annual December address that something like 12 to 14 PLA units, including nuclear submarines, were spotted in the Indian Ocean region. So it is again the P8I, which we bought from USA, that came, and we do know that we have exact record of how many ships have come. We recorded their movement parameters. We know all about them in terms of acquiring their digital signatures, which can be used in the future. So this is an emerging field of maritime domain awareness where P8I has contributed significantly, and the numbers is going to go up to 20, not even 12 as brought out. We are looking at 20 more coming into Indian Navy. That will open up an option for us to position some of them not only on the west coast but also in Andaman Nicobar, as was suggested by Udai. So we are running out of time, so I do not want to take any more time. There's plenty more that will be discussed perhaps in the panel discussion tomorrow, and I'll hand over to Bala just by saying thank you to all the panelists for a wonderful presentation, which has raised many questions of great relevance to us in terms of this. So I think Commodore Ajay's Anil Jaisingh has also brought to our notice in the chat box. You can look at it to say that France was one of the first countries outside the squad to also look at the emerging scenario here. It has its interest in Reunion Island. It has its interest in Indian Ocean region, and it's a major player for us as far as India is concerned. Over to you, Bala. Except to say, I must thank the speakers, Jaydev Ranade, who delivered the inaugural address, and all the speakers in both the sessions for wonderful contribution to this discourse that we have launched. It is not the last. It is not only the first one. We have 3 more that's coming up. What is happening tomorrow, and thereafter one in October, one in November, and the last one in December, where again the 3 organizations will be coming together to generate discussions of great relevance to Indian strategy and the way ahead. Thank you. Over to you, Bala.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Commodore Vasan, sir, for chairing the session. Thank you one and all for your participation. We are grateful to the speakers for the insightful presentation and discussions laid forth. We also thank the participants for taking time out to be with us and bringing relevant questions to the table. With this, we conclude day 1. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, and we await your participation with the same excitement and rigor. Tomorrow, we are dealing with 2 verticals. One would be on cybersecurity, and the second would be on the Chinese media landscape. With this, I would like to conclude day 1. Jai Hind. Thank you.